Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Eliza Leone. I'm the registered dietitian that works for Restaurant Associates. We do the food service and the catering here on the HMS campus. In this class, we're going to be making a pasta dish that is a great option for something, made fresh and hot like we're doing tonight. But it's also a great option if you're, making meals ahead, if you're hosting people for the holidays, or if you just like to meal prep. This is a great option for making, up to 5 days ahead, I would say. And you could make everything ahead and put it in the fridge, or you could make most of it ahead and then add some things later. So I'll talk about that as we go through. But this is a pasta dish. I am a huge pasta lover, and people often believe that if they want to follow a healthy eating pattern that they have to eliminate pasta. Not true. Not true at all. And I will tell you lots of reasons why throughout the class tonight. But we're making a really delicious edamame pesto. So that's a traditional basil pesto that just has edamame added to it. And we're also going to be adding some cherry tomatoes, some sun-dried tomatoes as well, some spinach. So it's going to be nice and full of veggies. And I'm going to talk about a few different kinds of pastas tonight as well. So talking about some safety points up front, yet again, this is a vegetarian meal, my favorite kind, because that takes some pressure off of the food safety stuff in the kitchen. The only item here that is animal-based is the Parmesan cheese that we're using. So if you eliminated that, this would be a vegan dish, and it would still be plenty flavorful and filling and delicious without the Parmesan. Always make sure that you've washed your fruits and but your veggies and your herbs before we start going. That saves you some time. And if you, let's see, always make sure that you have a nice sharp knife. Something else that I always talk about. You want to make sure you have a very sharp knife, because if it's dull, it can actually slip, and it's more likely to cut you than a sharp knife, believe it or not. Let's see. So, all right, we're going to run through the plan of work for tonight. So the order in which we are working our way through this recipe to get everything done at the same time. So the first thing we're going to do, I have a pot right here. You can see it. I'm gonna, well, Samantha can do the overhead view as well, spotlight next to me. But that, this is the overhead view that you'll be seeing everything else I'm doing here. It's a little bit high, actually. I'm gonna bring that a little bit lower so you can see better. But I've got a pot here, and I'm gonna be boiling my frozen edamame. It only takes a few minutes. If your edamame has been sitting out of the freezer for a while, or if it's been in the refrigerator instead, you probably don't even need to boil it, but we'll do it just in case to be safe. We're also going to prepare our pesto. You can do that in a food processor, or you can do that by hand, the old school way, back before food processors were invented. But of course, a food processor is much easier. Then, if we have time, we can toast our pine nuts. If we don't have time, pine nuts are delicious as is. We don't need to toast them. And then we're going to be cooking our pasta and cutting the remainder of the ingredients, then tossing it all back together. All right, so I'm going to fill, those of you cooking along, take a nice big pasta pot or a Dutch oven and fill it about 2/3 of the way with water. We're going to bring this up to a boil. And so I'm putting this to high. All right. And to make it boil a little bit faster, I'm going to put this lid on it too. Traps the heat inside so it doesn't all evaporate out. So while this is coming to a boil, I'm going to move it over to the side, and we're going to talk about the pesto ingredients, and we're going to prepare those a little bit before we throw them in the food processor. So we've got a few ingredients here for the pesto. So this is nice, fresh basil. The basil that we get here in our kitchens is always, like, all of the herbs that we get are huge. So These leaves are pretty big compared to my hand. The kind that you get in the store may not be this big, but that's okay. Also got some nice buds on here. So nice happy plant. So we've got lots and lots of basil. That's the sort of, I would say that's the main flavor component that you get in pesto. Then we've got some Parmesan. I have this in a block. You don't need to have it in a block if you would rather have it grated already, that's okay. But I'm gonna show you 2 different ways to prepare this Parmesan today. Or actually, just thinking, I don't have my microplane with me, so I'll tell you 2 different ways. But I'll only do one way. But we can, you have the option of grating the Parmesan into the pesto, or you can use, let me find my, I love this tool. This is a Y peeler shaped like a Y, that's why it's called that. And this is a really fun tool to kind of shave off your Parmesan into like nice flat ribbons. And it just gives you another, you know, fun shape, texture, a visual appeal of your dish. So then we've got pine nuts here. Pine nuts are very small, as you can see, also called pignoli nuts. These are, they come from Italy. If you've ever seen those like trees that kind of look like pine trees, they're like tall, skinny, umbrella pine trees. When you look at like pictures of Italy, these pine nuts come from that. Then we've got garlic, of course. You can't have any Italian-like dish without garlic. So, like I said, we're gonna prep this. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna grab my food processor bowl. Bring the whole thing over here. Take the lid off. And I can.
You might want to put it a little bit more in the camera view.
Yes, thank you.
A little bit more forward. Perfect.
Okay, let me make it not right in the middle of my cutting board, but there we go. That's good. So I'm not gonna blend it just yet, although I guess we could while we wait for the water to boil. But the first thing I'm gonna do is with this garlic, I'm just gonna cut the hard end off. I'm using 2, so I usually do half the recipe that you all do. So I'm using 2 cloves. And if you're following the recipe provided, then you would be doing 4 cloves. And because we're putting this in a food processor, there's no need to go crazy with cutting this. I'm just gonna like roughly slice it just to break it up into slightly smaller pieces. And I'm just gonna dump that right into the food processor bowl. I've also got the pine nuts here. I saved a little bit more in a separate bowl because I want to use some of this for a garnish. So this is about 1/4 cup of pine nuts. So if you're following the recipe provided, it would be 1/2 cup. So we're going pretty heavy with the pesto in this dish. If you haven't noticed, it's a big hefty portion of pesto. So I'm just gonna dump all these pine nuts right in there. Then I'm gonna scooch this food processor out of the way because I'm gonna prep the basil. So I'm gonna pull, well, I guess you have 2 options here. So take a look at your basil. The stem can be kind of tough. So if it's a really big, really big sprig like this one, it's got a thicker stem. And you may not want to use the stem in your pesto, but if you chop it up before you stick it in, it's more likely to not be like stringy or anything. So I say let's go for it. So what I'm gonna do is line up all my basil sprigs so the ends are all together there. And I'm just gonna cut off the little like brown end, just enough so that like dried part is gone. And if you wanted to have some basil as a garnish in the end, you could pull some leaves off here. But what I'm gonna do is just chop up the stems all the way up to the top and roughly chop those leaves and throw it into the food processor. So this is a huge, using a food processor or something like it is a huge help with reducing your food waste, because you can throw those herb stems right in. And you don't have to throw them instead in the garbage or the compost. So I am, like you can see, I'm cutting these pretty small, even though we're gonna put it in the food processor, because I don't want these stems to like shred and get stringy in the food processor instead. I want them to really be small pieces. And then I'm bunching those leaves all together. And now we're getting up to the really thin parts of the stems. So you don't have to worry so much about cutting them small. So I have a very small food processor here. I may not be able to fit all of this. Let's see if I can fit it. I think it'll be fine. So if you're cooking along, you can definitely smell this. Basil is one of the best smells in the world, in my opinion. And pesto can actually be made, I guess you can't call it pesto, but it can be made with any kinds of greens. It can be, you know, spinach, arugula. If you have carrots or beets that have the greens at the top, then you can use that as well. If you omit the basil altogether, then you won't get the same flavor, but you could do like half basil, half something else. All right, so we've got our Parmesan. I've got my Y peeler. So the trick, the most ergonomic and the safest way to use this type of peeler is to hold your cheese or whatever you're peeling and peel away from you. Gets stuck in the peeler sometimes, but peel away from you so you don't risk slipping and slicing your hand. So your recipe for 4 servings of the final dish will require half a cup of Parmesan. I'm just gonna do a quarter. And I'm kind of just eyeballing all of this also, by the way. Check on the water. It's getting a little bit bubbly. Okay. This looks like about a quarter cup. I'm gonna throw that in there too. And I'm gonna place this aside because we're gonna use more of this for a garnish. I'm not gonna get rid of that. All right. So I think while we're waiting for that water to boil, we can blend up our pesto. So I'm gonna plug in my food processor to my extension cord over here. Try to at least. How do I want to do this? I only have so many plugs on my extension cord. I'm gonna move this pot to my other burner. So I have outlet space for my food processor. All right, there we go. So you can see this. So all we've got in here is basil, garlic, Parmesan, and pine nuts. But it's pretty dry, so we definitely need our olive oil to start. You don't have to add all of the olive oil that the recipe calls for right now, but you can add a little bit just to sort of lubricate the blade. So the recipe calls for, I believe, a quarter cup of olive oil to start initially, but I probably just did like 2 tablespoons, like half of that. So I think Zoom is gonna block out this noise, but we'll see. All right, so you know it's a little bit too dry when it has like an empty spot down toward the bottom. So I'm gonna push it all down there. If you have a rubber spatula, that's a really good trick for something like this. So you can make sure to scoop every last bit. I'm gonna go again. Pretty good. So this is like a nice bright green. It's brighter in real life. The color always gets a little bit muted over the video, but nice bright green. Another, not a traditional ingredient, but it would go really well with this. If you want to maintain the bright green, an option would be to add some lemon juice, if you would like. The citrus juice, the acidity helps to keep it nice and bright. But also when we add this edamame after we boiled it, then that is gonna also lighten it up a little bit as well. Let me check our water right now. Still heating up, but because the edamame, even when the water is like a rolling boil, edamame doesn't take long to cook at all. It only takes, no more than 5 minutes if it's straight from the freezer. So this is not even straight from the freezer. This has been sitting out for a little while. So I think I'm gonna take a shortcut. Again, I'm gonna check in. Is anybody cooking along besides Bev? Speak up or mention it in the chat. So Bev, is your edamame frozen?
It's been sitting out for about 45 minutes.
Okay, and is it beans like this or is it inside the pods?
It's beans like yours.
Okay, so then I think the water doesn't even have to be a rolling boil. We can just toss it in however it is right now. So that's what we're gonna do. Lots of wires going on tonight. So I'm curious, have any of you made homemade pesto before? And if so, how did it turn out? Feel free to unmute.
I've never made it. This is Laurie. I've never made it, but it's interesting because most homemade pesto I've had, I thought had too much olive oil, and it looked like yours was just sort of enough. A lot of people are very heavy-handed, and it makes it a little greasy for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of making something yourself, that you can modify it however you want.
Yeah.
All right.
What other nuts are good instead of pine nuts if you don't have those?
I have done almonds before. I've done walnuts before. They have, a different flavor. If you've had pine nuts before, it's almost like a floral flavor. Pumpkin hummus, yum. You could use pumpkin seeds. You could use seeds instead of nuts. Yeah, there are lots of options.
Okay, thank you.
Any kind of nut, any kind of seed, any kind of greens or herbs, anything like that. All right, so I'm not sure if you can tell really on the camera, but there are like little bubbles at the bottom that are starting to come up. So this water is hot. You can probably see that it's a little bit steamy. So I'm gonna just dump in my edamame here. And so my edamame has been sitting at room temp for a little while as well. So you can see one of them, or maybe it's a little hard to see. One of them is floating already. When things start, there goes another one. When things start floating, that's a good sign that they're done. So you can see all the little beans at the bottom are kind of jiggling around on the bubbles. And boiling edamame is only one way to cook them. You don't have to even boil them. You could just thaw them entirely. You could steam them instead. So this is just one way. And all I wanted to do was make sure that these are beans, they're soybeans. So they have some starch in them, a good amount of starch. So I just want to make sure that some of the starch is kind of loosened up a little bit. Same goes for when you cook pasta. in water, which you'll see. If you've ever used a recipe that calls for some of the pasta water to be used in the sauce, there's a reason for that. When you boil things, especially starchy ingredients like edamame and pasta, the water leaches out some of the starch. So I did definitely want to like do that a little bit with the edamame. Now you can see all these little edamames are coming up to the top. It's kind of fun to watch. They're coming up to the top and they're floating around the edges. And then as soon as they're up to the top, we can scoop them right out. So I have this tool here. This is a sieve. It's this, it's not too big. They make these in all different shapes and sizes. You can also have, you can use a like a pasta scooper or spider or something like that. But we want to save this water for the pasta. So I don't want to dump this out. But I'm scooping up the edamame and I'm just going to dump it straight into the food processor. And then we're going to blend that up and the pesto will be done. So we're going to scoop all the edamame out. So edamame, like I said, it's a kind of bean, soybean. So this is a great source of plant-based protein that we're going to be adding to our dish today. So yes, this is a vegetarian pasta dish, but vegetarian pasta doesn't just have to be tomato sauce on pasta. You can add beans and like plant protein to your dish. Okay, so we have this water that we already were starting to bring to a boil. I'm not going to turn off this burner because we're going to keep this hot for the pasta. So I'm going to keep it on high, put the lid on again. I'm going to keep an eye on it because if it starts to bubble, then it's probably going to spit everywhere. But I'm going to scooch this over very carefully. So at home, you can keep that on your burner. Keep the lid on it to prevent all the water from evaporating, but we're going to keep it, coming to a boil for the pasta. Great, and now you can see I have my edamame that I dumped into my pesto there. Rather than switch around all the outlets again, I'm just going to turn around behind me and plug in this food processor and blend it up. And you'll see it's going to be a nice, like, bright green color. Put the lid on so it doesn't spray everywhere. This is beautiful. It's a little bit lighter green than it was just a few minutes ago. And now it's also got a protein boost as well. So the edamame is ready, the pesto is ready to go. So we're just going to set that aside while we work on some other ingredients here. All right. So look at my notes here. All right, so I'm going to talk about some different kinds of pastas. I'm going to show you some examples. I have 3 different types of pastas that I wanted to discuss today. So they look similar, few differences between them. My water is a rolling boil right now, so I'm just going to turn it down a smidge because I don't want to use it just yet. So the pasta I'm going to be cooking tonight, which doesn't have to be the pasta that you cook, is whole wheat. So I've used rotini pasta. Rotini is this shape. I've used the same shape for all the pastas for an equal comparison. But whole wheat pasta, this is Barilla brand, just for no particular reason. It's a good, reliable brand. Oops. Then we've got white rotini here. And this is chickpea based. This brand is called Banza. I'll show you the box. this is the brand of chickpea pasta that we're using tonight. And there are lots of other like, non-flour based or non-wheat based pastas. Some are made with rice flour, some are made with lentil flour instead of chickpea flour. So lots and lots of different options there. But I wanted to discuss the difference between the nutrition as well, and the texture and the flavor too, because that has a lot to do with, what kind of pasta you're gonna choose. So, nutritionally, I wrote down some facts here to compare. So if you're looking at 1 cup of cooked pasta for each of these, whole wheat, chickpea, white. The whole wheat is gonna have 8 grams of protein, 7 grams of fiber, and 1.5 grams of unsaturated fat, the healthy fat. Then the white pasta has a little bit less protein. It still has protein, believe it or not, even though it's a refined grain. And it's got less than half the amount of fiber. So that's where you lose a lot of the nutrients. And it's got less of the unsaturated healthy fats as well. Then, when you leave the grain family and you come over to the legume family for the chickpea pasta, you get 11 grams of protein compared to 8 and 7. 11 grams of protein, so that's significant. 5 grams of fiber, still very good, and 3 grams of the unsaturated healthy fats. So more protein, more healthy fat, and still a good amount of fiber, just not as much as the whole wheat. So something to consider. However, something else to consider with these, the chickpea pasta, sometimes it cooks much more easily, much quicker. So it's easy to overcook. The texture can be a little bit softer and it can kind of fall apart a little bit if you overcook it. So when the box says al dente is what you want. Absolutely when it comes to chickpea pasta. And really, I'm going to show you, we're going to be doing an al dente trick tonight. So al dente, it's an Italian term. It means to the teeth. Basically it means like, if you're cooking your pasta to al dente, you're still going to have a little bit of firmness in the middle of the noodle. It's not going to be fully soft and uniform all the way through. You're going to have a little bit of firmness left in the middle of the noodle, which is actually preferred because that way, anytime you're cooking a pasta that you want to then add sauce to, the recipe will usually say, as this one does, cook the pasta first, then, strain it out, put it back in the pot and mix in your sauce. Or you might have a separate pan with the sauce already going and you add your cooked pasta to that hot sauce. So you finish cooking the pasta in the sauce. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We are going to cook the pasta to al dente, strain it out, get rid of the water at that point, and then we're going to put it back in the pot after we've heated up the other veggies that we're going to be preparing. So, speaking of those veggies, I'm going to start doing that right now. I don't want to cook the pasta just yet. I want to cook it when it gets closer to the time that we want to use it. So keep an eye on your boiling water. Make sure it's not boiling over. You can turn it down a smidge if you need to. Right. So we're adding cherry tomatoes. These are actually grape tomatoes because they're more oblong like a grape rather than spherical like a cherry. So I have a fun trick. Some of you that have attended past classes, maybe you've seen this trick before. But I'm going to be cutting these in half. And to do that, you could take each individual tomato and slice it in half, and it takes a really, really long time. Or you could take 2 like deli lids like this, deli container lids, or 2 small plates with a nice ridge on the edge. Lay it flat with the ridge side up. Fill a single layer of tomatoes. Lay them all flat. And then put the ridge side facing down. So you're making a little tomato sandwich. You're holding them in place. And then take your nice sharp knife. It's got some basil stuck on it. Nice sharp knife. Hold this down Make sure your fingers are not like this, they're pulled back so you don't cut them. I'm gonna pull this right over to the edge of my counter because it makes it easier for me. And you just bring your blade right through. See how fast that was? And now these are all cut in half. Super, super easy. So I'm gonna put these into a bowl on the side. All the ingredients that we're gonna be adding to the pasta, we can just stick them in a bowl. So grab a bowl. All right, so I'm gonna dump my tomato halves. They were sliced perfectly in half. It's so easy, so fast. So I've got another few tomatoes to do, so I'll dump those in. Again, make sure they're laying on the long side. Pull my fingers back, not down around, pull them back and up. Slide my nice sharp knife across. And there you go. All the tomatoes are cut in half. Done. That could have taken 10 minutes if you did it each individual tomato. So we definitely took a shortcut. A different kind of tomato here. These are sun-dried tomatoes. I love adding sun-dried tomatoes to any dish, but especially like a plant-forward vegetarian dish, because they really provide a good like a well-rounded kind of meaty flavor and texture without meat, obviously. So what we're gonna do is just stack them up on top of each other, flatten them out and stack them up. You might wanna do 2 stacks. And you can either just slice them into sticks, or you can slice them and then dice them. Whatever you prefer. I kind of like them to be like long, skinny shapes, so that's what I'm gonna go with. So I've got them stacked on top of each other, just holding them in place, and they can be a little slippery because of the oil, so just be very careful. If you have a nice sharp knife, that is the key, as always. Also, you can buy smoked sun-dried tomatoes, so they have an even more like meaty sort of flavor. If you're feeling like you want like the flavors or the feelings that meat brings to your meal, but you don't want the meat, having smoked paprika or smoked sun-dried tomato, something like that, is a great option. All right, so we've got some nice little strips of sun-dried tomato here. So again, I'm gonna put those straight into the bowl with the cherry tomatoes, or grape tomatoes, I would say that. Okay. Another easy thing we're gonna do, we're just gonna, if you would like to use lemon as a final, flavor addition, you can slice your lemon in half. Key, this is a nice firm lemon. The key to get juice out of your lemon easily is to cross one hand over the other, put some weight on it, and roll it back and forth. And then you're encouraging all those little pockets of juice inside to release. And this goes for any kind of citrus fruit that you're wanting to juice. I find that limes can be really hard to get juice out of sometimes, so this trick really helps. And then it's going to be much softer after you do that. So I'm just going to cut it in half so I can juice it later. And I'll set that aside. Hair in my face. All right. So looking at the time, I think I'm going to add my pasta now. Oops. Lid is getting a little bit hot. The water is boiling. So I'll bring it over so you can see the boil. Rolling boil. Put it back on my burner so the boil stays. And I'm gonna add, oops, I have to add my salt. I can't forget to add salt. Very important to add to pasta. When you ask a chef how much salt you should add, they say it should taste like the ocean. So I'm adding a decent sized pinch America's Test Kitchen, a great resource, says that it should be 1 tablespoon of salt per gallon of water. All right, so I've got my pasta and I'm throwing this in. So I know it's not showing under the camera right at this moment, but. This is what we're working with right now. When you add the pasta, the water kind of settles down, but then it's gonna come back up to a boil again. So I'm gonna set it, I'm gonna look at the time actually, so it's 6:10. I know that this pasta takes about 12 minutes to cook, according to the box. Takes about 12 minutes to cook fully. So I'm gonna taste it, you know, a couple times before then to see if it's al dente, and if so, I'm gonna dump it out. All right. So there's another ingredient that we need to prep in the meantime. We're gonna add spinach. So this is baby spinach, smaller leaves, more delicate stems than full-grown spinach. And I love adding spinach to pasta and rice dishes and like any type of grain, because you can just chiffonade the spinach, which is what we're gonna do tonight, a nice skinny ribbon, and you mix it into the pasta and spinach softens up so quickly. So I'm gonna show you the official way to chiffonade and then the time-saving, cheating way to chiffonade. All right, so I just took a big handful of spinach here. So I'm taking the leaves, each individual leaf, stacking them up. And this goes for, you could do this chiffonade technique with any type of leafy green, any type of herb like basil, people will often chiffonade. So I've got it all stacked up. We can keep the stems, there's no reason to get rid of those, but if you prefer to cut them off, you can. Like I said, baby spinach has nice delicate stems, so you don't have to worry about it being too tough. Oops, and what we have to do is we're rolling it up. Roll it all the way up. And then I'm gonna cut at a slight angle. So like a 45-degree angle. So like this would be cutting directly, you know, I guess 90-degree. This is 45. And we're doing skinny, skinny ribbons. This is the chiffonade technique. So what you end up with is these kind of like shredded ribbons. It's like shredded spinach into little skinny ribbons. So that is the correct way, I would say, if you were going to culinary school, that's what they would say. You pile it up, roll it up, and slice it. Or the quick, cheap way, just put it all in a pile, kind of crunch it all together, and then slice it. So you're not going to get beautiful, uniform slices, but it's all going in the same place. So if you're trying to save time and you don't really care as much about the uniformity of the spinach, then this is definitely an easy way to go. So you still end up with little pieces, but they're not all like a uniform skinny ribbon, but that's totally fine. So spinach, as with any leafy green, although spinach more than others, again, I'm gonna add that to the bowl with the tomatoes, and I'm gonna cut a little bit more. Spinach really shrinks down when it's heated up. So I don't want to not do enough. It's easy with spinach to say like, oh, that looks like enough, and then it shrinks down to nothing. So with spinach, it's a safe bet to say double what you think you need. So I'm grabbing another big handful here. I'm doing the easy cheat way. You could also add the spinach in whole, don't even have to slice it. Another thing I love about spinach is that if you buy those big containers of the fresh greens from the grocery store and you keep them in your fridge, they're gonna go bad before you can get to them, or at least that's my experience. But if you take that huge container and just throw it straight in the freezer when you get home from the grocery store, you can pull frozen spinach leaves out and put them into pasta, throw them into a smoothie, throw it into whatever grains you're making. All you have to do is mix it in at the end, and it just wilts super fast and becomes a part of the dish without even hardly any effort. So, fresh spinach that you freeze at your house, in my opinion, is light years more appealing and better than frozen spinach that you buy at the grocery store already frozen. Is that kind is already cooked, then it's like pressed into a block, and it just kind of has no flavor, and it's no good. If you like that, then that's great, but if you're wanting to add frozen spinach or more greens into your diet, but you don't like frozen spinach, then buy fresh and stick it in the freezer, and that makes it way easier. All right, so it's been 6 minutes since I threw the pasta in. I'm gonna just taste one. So I feel like in life, there are two kinds of people. There are the people that pull the pasta out and throw it right in their mouth and go, and burn their mouth. Or there are the people that put it under cold water before they taste it. I'm a cold water person. So I'm gonna rinse this in cold water first. Don't want to burn my mouth and ruin my whole dinner. That's pretty close, actually. Pretty close to being al dente. I think I might let it go like a couple more minutes. So like I said, we're gonna be cooking, heating up the other ingredients and then adding the pasta back in and finishing the pasta there. So I don't want the pasta to be fully cooked all the way through before we even add it to the other ingredients. If that happens, the pasta, it just gets overcooked and it falls apart and it is not what you want. Okay, so if you're wanting to see the ratio of what I've got going into the pasta, it's probably 50-50, maybe a little bit more tomato than spinach. Might add a little bit more spinach. So whenever I make pasta, and not to say that this is how you should do it, but this is my recommendation for fitting pasta into a healthy eating pattern. I think it's always really, really important to make sure that whatever herbs and vegetables and beans and all that stuff you're adding to your dish, it should be 50% those ingredients and 50% pasta. It's so easy for pasta dishes to just be, I don't know, just like a huge pile of pasta with like a little bit of tomato sauce on top. Tomato sauce also counts as a vegetable. So tomato sauce is a great option. But yeah, I feel like pastas typically, they don't have, a couple minutes passed, I'm gonna pull my pasta out. They don't have enough of the vegetables and the beans and the things like that that make it a well-rounded dish. And you end up just eating starch and then you're hungry, an hour later. All right, so I'm gonna dump. I've got my strainer. We can get rid of the pasta water at this point, so I'm gonna just strain it out in the sink behind me. If your pot is hot, make sure you've got some towels or something to hold it. Right, that looks awesome. So I'm gonna pull over the induction burner so you all can see what I'm doing. And I'm gonna turn it down. It was on high because it was boiling with the pasta, but I'm gonna turn it down at this point. I've got it on probably medium. It's still gonna be pretty hot because it was just boiling water. Add a little bit of oil. And what do I want to add first? I'm gonna add these veggies. So the bowl of the tomatoes, so this is the fresh tomatoes, the sun-dried tomatoes, and the spinach. All going in. Right? So this is just gonna soften up the vegetables a little bit before we add the pasta. If you like, in future recipes like this, you can have this going in a pan, you know, next to your pasta that's boiling. And you can super, you know, really cook the tomatoes. You can soften everything up like a lot before you add it in. But I kind of like having a little bit of the texture still, like the little bit of crunch from the tomato. That's my personal preference. But as always, you can change up a recipe however you like. So you're seeing now how the spinach is cooked down. It's, you know, really reduces by a lot. Right. So we are also now going to swoop in our pesto. So I'm taking it out of my food processor. I've still got it in there, so I'm just going to scoop it all out into the pot. Again, if you have a rubber spatula, that's a really great tool. Right? I'm just gonna stir that around a little bit. And then we'll be ready to add our pasta back in. Okay, I'm gonna dump in the pasta now. And stir it all up. So something I love about rotini, this pasta shape, is that, I'll make sure it's closer to the middle. All those little crevices are really great for a dish like this that's got a sauce that's gonna get stuck in between all those little cracks. So rotini really holds on to the sauce. So the shape of your pasta, obviously there are like, you know, 1,000 shapes out there. The shape of your pasta, you know, affects your enjoyment just as much as anything else. This sauce might not really stick if you have like, you know, linguine or like long noodles. It would stick to it a little bit, but it would get a little bit more clumpy. So like the little crevices in the rotini are able to grab onto some of that pesto, and it helps the pesto become more well incorporated into the dish. Now turn that down, it's getting a little brown on the bottom. All right. So once this is all combined, you're good to go. So I'm gonna move this over again, and I'm gonna assemble with the rest of our garnishes. So scooch this over. All right, so I've got my plate here. This is a pasta plate or a bowl plate, whatever you want to call it. Shallow bowl. And the recipe that you all received is written for about 4 servings. So that is like 1.5 cups of pasta to 2 cups of pasta. And I'm trying to remember the ratio of pesto. I think for 1 cup of pasta, it was like 1/4 cup of pesto or maybe even more. So it's a good amount of pesto. It definitely makes it super flavorful, makes it really you know, aromatic with that basil flavor. Wipe off this cutting board here. Lower this down a little bit more. All right. So I've got some more Parmesan left that I saved to use my Y peeler. You kind of end up with a funny shaped block of Parmesan, but there are worse things in the world. Come on. Something else that's kind of fun about shaving your Parmesan like this is that it just kind of falls wherever on the plate. Again, if you prefer to grate it, you definitely can. It's just like a nice way to switch up the shapes on your plate. Then we have our pine nuts again. And so we didn't get to toast them. You could just put these in a pan on like medium heat and just kind of toss them around for like 3 minutes until you can start to smell them. You always want to like waft with your hand to like push the smell toward your face rather than putting your face over the pot and you can, you know, get burned. So you can definitely toast these if you'd like. Don't have to. Then of course we've got the lemon. Lemon is always a great addition to pasta in my opinion. It provides a brightening effect, brightens up the flavor. And I feel like it does wonders for, you know, knowing like pasta can be heavy. When you add lemon, it lightens up the dish. It makes it not feel so heavy when you eat it. It makes it feel like it's like a, you know, salad instead of a pasta dish. In terms of like how heavy it feels in your stomach. And there was something else I wanted to add. What was it? Oh, olive oil. Of course, you can't have a pasta dish without a drizzle of olive oil. And should probably do a little salt. And some pepper as well. Could also add some red pepper flakes if you like.
I was just gonna ask about that.
Yeah, red pepper flakes are sort of like a traditional, like,
Yeah, and
yeah.
a little bit really goes a long way.
It does, I know, you definitely don't need a whole lot. But
Beautiful.
this is our really delicious pasta dish with lots of veggies in there. The sauce is also very plant forward with the nuts and the basil, all that basil we put in there, all that spinach that we put in here, all of the tomatoes. There's so many vegetables in here. And on top of that, this is whole wheat pasta, which, like I said, provides a ton of fiber in addition to the fiber from the veggies and a ton of protein as well, and unsaturated fats. So the reason I highlighted those 3 nutrients, fiber, protein, and unsaturated fats, are because those nutrients are the ones that help you feel full for a long time. So that can be something that people find when they eat white pasta without meat in it. They might feel like, it doesn't fill me up, I'm not satisfied. So if you add plant-based proteins like nuts and edamame, and if you add all these vegetables, and if you do whole wheat pasta or chickpea pasta, or even white pasta as well with all the other stuff added to it, then you're just gonna feel more physically satisfied for a longer amount of time. Fat, protein, and fiber are the key to having like a satisfying plant-forward meal. So that's what we got going on here, and I can't wait to eat this for dinner. So Bev, how's yours going?
Okay, it's ready to go.
I want to see it.
I use Trader Joe's. I've never tried it. It's a quinoa. Wait a minute, quinoa and brown rice fusilli.
Oh, interesting.
So it I think I might have gone just like cooked it just 30 seconds too much because now it's still cooking,
Okay,
It's good. I tasted some. It's delicious.
that's great.
Great combination of flavors.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. There are so many different kinds of pastas made with so many different types of flour. So, you know, even I do want to say, I'm not trying to say don't eat white pasta. White pasta is a beautiful thing. I love white pasta. If you're ever feeling like white pasta doesn't fill you up enough, then you just follow these tips that we've talked about today, and 50% pasta, 50% veggies and beans and other ingredients, and you will be just as satisfied as you would be if you had like a heavy meat sauce or something like that.
That's good to know. I have a question
Here's-
about, you had said the
Here's
spinach.
mine.
Oh,
There's
it's beautiful.
Oh.
Nice.
Bravo. Bravo. You had mentioned the trick about putting spinach in the freezer. Would you repackage it from, like, put it in a Ziploc or some plastic before you put it in the freezer?
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how long does it last in the freezer?
For as long as anything else would last in the freezer, like a year or whatever.
Oh, wow.
It
Did
lasts a
not know
long
that.
time, and it's actually cool. So I do this.
I'm always looking what to do with extra spinach when I cook with it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what I do is I don't even bother putting it in the fridge, because sometimes you buy it and then the next day it's already mushy.
Yeah.
Put it straight in the freezer as soon as you get home, and if you keep it in the freezer, and when you take it out to use it, put it right back in the freezer again. You don't want those delicate leaves to thaw at all, because they will stay like individual separate leaves that are all just like individually frozen. It's
Life-changing.
it's such a great like way to add more greens to anything. You just grab a handful of frozen spinach and throw it in whatever you're making.
Well, no, Bev, I always throw it out. Like, I use part of it and then I throw it out.
You're not alone. That's what everybody does, but any kind of green, as long as you plan to cook it, you can do that same thing. You throw it in the freezer. If you want to use it for a salad or eat it raw, then you won't be able to put it in the freezer because it won't thaw right. It'll get.
No, I only use it for like soups and stuff.
Yeah, that would be perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. Anybody else have questions? I know we're a couple minutes over, but any questions from everybody here?
I think Bev has dinner tonight.
I know. Thank you. That was great. I can't wait to really dig in.
To let me know what you think. I'd love to hear. And you all will be getting your, thank you so much, Ju. That's so nice.
Oh,
I mean, I'm looking forward to coming back here in April. I love doing these classes. I love, having all these people attend them. It's really makes me so happy. So,
well, we'll be here. We'll be here.
Perfect. And yeah, you'll all be getting the YouTube recording for this class as well, so you can watch that. I'll be sending it at the end of the week. All right. Thank you all so much.
Take care.
Happy
Bye, Deb.
holidays.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thank you so much.